Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll hear inspirational stories of heart-centered leaders who have awakened to their higher purpose and taken that leap of faith to follow their heart and make an impact in the world. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with your host, Jennifer Spohr.
I am thrilled to welcome our guest today, Mario Porreca. Mario is the founder of a company called Launching a Podcast, where he and his team help busy professionals launch and produce a professional podcast that attracts clients and drives revenue. He is a former chef, radio host, television personality, author, and speaker who builds platforms that build businesses. He is also the host of a podcast titled 10-Minute Mindset, which I'm a huge fan of, that helps busy achievers start their day in a better way. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
I know. I'm excited. We're going to have a really fun and great conversation.
It's like deja vu, except in reverse, because you were on my podcast not so long ago, and now we get to switch sides of the desk.
Totally. I know. I've just been really excited about doing this interview and looking forward to it. So you have a really diverse background, which I find really intriguing. And I know that our listeners would love to know as well, what inspired you to do what you're doing today? And how did you get from where you were to where you are now?
That's a really loaded question.
It is. I know. Let's put it all out there.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. Let me preface the whole story by saying, I really feel like, and this is something that I talk about on 10-Minute Mindset a lot, but I think is super, super important. I feel like that most of all of my success, I will say, in life has been a consequence of doing two things simultaneously. And they sound counterintuitive, but they're really not. Those things are being completely focused on what it is I want to achieve and where I want to go, but at the same exact time being completely open to all the possibilities and the potential around me. So that pulling at both ends of being completely focused yet completely opened is what pushes me to the middle and allows me to be what I call centered. And so that's really, I think, what the big key is, getting up every day, knowing what I want to accomplish, but not being so stuck. I think it's Tony Robbins that always says, be focused on what you want, but be flexible in your approach. And that's been my quote-unquote secret, if there is one. So I started as a chef. I went straight from high school at 18 to training to be a chef. I did a 3-year apprenticeship. I was at the #1 city club in America. I had a very great career trajectory. I mean, to people on the outside, they would look at me and say, he's got it made. Because by the time I left that position, I could have pretty much gone to almost any property I wanted and name my price. I've been out of the industry for 10 years, and I still have people calling me that would bring me back in a heartbeat if I wanted to do that. And I don't say that to impress anyone or to be full of myself, but I was really focused and really dialed in at a really high-end property. And that did a couple of things. Number one, it taught me a great work ethic, but at the same, and let me also say that when I was doing that, I wasn't doing it my whole goal at that time was always to be an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. I grew up around that. So when I went to work in the kitchen, I was doing it with the intent to have my own restaurant empire. So if you would have asked me 10 years ago, where do you think you'll be in 10 years? I would have thought today where I sit, I would be opening my 4th restaurant and be managing those properties and doing all of that. So I was doing it to learn the ropes and learn the business, but I wanted to do it at a very high level and learn as best I could and, do it from the best. And so that's why I did what I did. But it was also the perfect storm. What I mean by that was it was a very competitive environment. I wasn't sleeping a lot at night. I was very stressed. I was eating all kinds of really good food as much as I wanted. And over the course of that time, I gained a lot of weight. And I was always an athlete growing up. But then when I worked in the restaurant, I got really heavy, and that changed a lot for me because not only did it change me physically, but I also noticed it changed me emotionally to where I wasn't showing up as I wanted to. I wasn't treating people the way that I usually do. I just wasn't all there, and I didn't like who I became, put it that way. And, we will justify anything in our lives. So at that point in my life, I would justify it by saying, I'm just getting older. This is what happens when you get older. I was 24 years old at the time. So, I mean, we will justify anything. That's not how you should be at 24. And I was so miserable. So what I did was, I eventually got to that place where I couldn't take it anymore. So I called my dad. My dad, like I said, he's an entrepreneur, but he's a chiropractor, and he's really into health and wellness. So I grew up around that, knowing how important being healthy and doing it naturally was. So I called him because I really figured that my body would be the thing that I had the most control over, that I could, just by being disciplined and knowing what to do, that would be a great starting point where I could see some progress of going back to where I wanted to be. So I called him and said, can you help me? And he said, I can, but you have to commit to it. You can't say you want to do this and then not do it. So I committed to it. That was the first thing that's very key. I committed to the process. And so in 6 months, I lost 70 pounds, felt better than I ever felt. My energy changed, my attitude changed, my desire to give back changed. And what happened was people saw that transformation and they started asking me what I was doing, because it's very visual when you lose that much weight. So I just started coaching people the way that I was taught to do it. And when I was doing my taxes that year, after people referring friends and, coming to me just organically, I was doing my taxes and I realized I made more money coaching people than I did cooking. And that's when I looked around and said, you know what, I wonder what would happen if I became intentional about this. I wonder what would happen if instead of just letting people come, I actually tried to build a business. And so that's when I made the decision to leave the restaurant world. And so I always say coaching, I didn't choose coaching, coaching chose me. So it wasn't something that I ever wanted to do. It just kind of found me that way. So I started coaching people on weight loss. And what happened here at this point was people would come to me because they knew I had a background of cooking. And anytime people want to get healthier or change their lifestyle for whatever reason, they think all they can eat the rest of their life is grilled chicken and broccoli. And nothing's further from the truth. So people would come to me all the time, clients and just regular people, knowing what I did, and say, well, what can I eat? And so this also, I saw the trend here and I said, instead of answering all these questions one-off, what I'll do is I'll write a cookbook. I'll write a cookbook, and then that way that'll give me another stream of revenue and it'll alleviate me having to answer this question all the time. So I wrote a cookbook. It turned into 2 cookbooks because a large company found out I was doing it and commissioned me to write another. So I ended up with 2. And what those did was it sent me on a big media tour. So as soon as the books came out, I was doing television shows all up and down the East Coast. I landed my own radio show. Aside from the books, I was writing 3 regular weekly columns for the local newspaper. And so I had my hand in pretty much every form of media at this point. I was doing public speaking. I spoke on cruise ships. I spoke at Google. I spoke all over the place. And, what I learned from this is that's where I discovered podcasting. When I was in the radio field, and this was back in 2011, so this was fairly new in podcasting. And I realized at that point that podcasting had a ton of advantages that radio didn't, and that broadcasting and podcasting are 2 different things, and I like the medium of podcasting better, specifically for business and brand building. And so armed with that, I got into podcasting, and since for the last 8 years, I've been in the field in some way, shape, or form. And when I launched 10-Minute Mindset, because what the other thing that I noticed, and this is another progression from, the whole weight loss thing and the coaching people, is that I noticed that people, if they had a goal in mind, the goal itself and your mindset is what dictates your success. Meaning, people can become successful pretty much at anything at any time. But the real definition of success for me is, can you keep the success? Not only can you keep it, but can you build on it? And you see so many people who yo-yo diet, right? They lose some weight, then they gain it back plus some, then they lose some more and they gain it. So what I noticed was the people who set goals such as, I want to show up differently. I want to be able to play with my kids more. I want to live longer to be with my grandchildren. They would change their lifestyle and they would consistently keep that success. Whereas the people who would set goals like, I want to fit in this dress to go to my class reunion, or I want to look good in this bathing suit while I'm on vacation, they would work really hard and be really focused. Then they would get to that point, achieve that, and then they would go, now what? And what I learned was anytime we say, now what, we always revert back to our strongest conditioning. So that's why a lot of people, it wasn't an execution or a strategy problem, it was a mindset problem. And so that's what led me to getting into the mindset end of things. So I did a lot of trainings, a lot of courses, a lot of certifications, a lot of studying of psychology around mindset, because I knew that was the differentiating factor between achieving success and keeping success. And that's what led me to start 10-Minute Mindset. And when I started 10-Minute Mindset, it was the most successful thing I've launched, because when I launched it, and this is why I think that was, and then I'll let you take over. I don't mean to take over your show, but when I launched 10-Minute Mindset, I did it knowing, look, I'm a capitalist at heart. So if I knew if I could find a way to monetize it, I would. But I said, you know what, even if 3 years from now I haven't made a dime off of it, I'd still be doing this because I like the topic. It's going to connect me with people that are really cool and interesting, and it's just a fun thing to do. But I noticed the trend, again, as I was talking to people, I realized that there were a lot of people that would buy podcasting equipment, spend tons of time guesting on other podcasts, but they didn't launch their own. And they had very powerful messages. And when I would ask them, why don't you have your own podcast? They would give me the same 5 reasons every single time. They would say, I don't have the time. I don't know the tech. I don't have the time to learn the tech. The whole process seems overwhelming. And to be honest, I wouldn't even know where to start if I wanted to. And because those same things kept coming up, I noticed that there was a need in the marketplace for a service that could facilitate that, because these messages needed to be heard by people. And at the same time, it's a great leverage tool to build a platform that builds your business. And so that's why we started the company, the Launching a Podcast Company, and that took off as well. And, we've been helping people do that for about the past 1.5 years now and have seen some really great results.
Okay, so my mind is blown right now. You just rattled off so many important pieces of wisdom. And I'm not going to necessarily mention them in the same order that you did. But one is, whatever we're going after is getting honest with ourselves about what we really want and choosing sustainable goals, right? Like you were saying about the weight loss, and I've been there personally too. Over the years, whether it's just from eating or surgeries or whatever, my weight has gone up and down, and I found the same thing, not just in the area of weight loss, but in every area of life, right? When we choose to go after something sustainable, or, when we get honest with ourselves, then we're setting ourselves up for success in terms of achieving a long-term transformation. The other thing you mentioned earlier in your answer was, you talked about setting an intention that you were going to commit to change, right? And that is really important, because change starts with a decision. It starts with making a decision and setting an intention that it's going to happen. And then commitment and consistency are key. There is no magic pill. There is no shortcut to transformation. That's what it takes in a nutshell.
Absolutely. I mean, that commitment is so important. That's the first step. But the other thing I think is self-awareness. I think that's a huge thing. And it's such a buzzword these days. But what self-awareness to me really is any result. I like to reverse engineer things. So I like to start at the end, start with the outcome. And if you listen to 10 Minute Mindset, my GEO method, gratitude, attention, outcome. We always start with the outcome. What outcome do you want, or what outcome are you getting? And then let's work our way backwards and figure it out. So for me, if you're talking self-awareness, let's look at the outcomes we're getting and the results we're getting in our lives today. What are we consistently producing? Now let's look at the behaviors that are creating those outcomes, because that's what an outcome is a consistent behavior. Now let's look at the thoughts that lead to those behaviors. And if you know what thoughts lead to certain behaviors which create the outcome, you can change the thoughts. And so to me, that's what self-awareness is. Most people, they see the outcome and they can't figure out why they're getting it. Or they see the outcome and they just try to change and will themselves to do it. But it's not a willpower problem. It's a thoughts problem.
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
change your thoughts, you'll get better results.
Yeah, we create our reality from within, right? Like whether you look at that from a scientific standpoint or a spiritual standpoint, right? Everything is energy. Everything that's in our external environment right now once started out as a thought. We
Absolutely.
Can't control what other people do, and we can't control all circumstances, but we can absolutely control our thoughts, our emotions, and our own actions. And that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I'm a big, big believer in focusing on the things you can control, because I think a lot of people focus on things they can't control. And I see this a lot in business, especially. People are so focused on audience and generating an audience. They think, if I'm a digital entrepreneur and I generate an audience, then I'll never run out of clients. Well, that's completely false, because just because you have an audience doesn't mean they'll become clients. I know a lot of people, not a lot, but I can think of specific people off the top of my head, I won't mention names, but that have 50,000 plus followers on social media and have 0 clients. So it's not, an audience generation problem. It's what problem do you solve and how do you do that? And to me, an audience is something you can't control. That's a byproduct. You do really cool things. You help people solve their problems. Other people will show up and pay attention. And that's how you generate an audience. And then, with that audience, they're not necessarily there to buy from you or to do business with you. They're there to consume what you're doing. So the minute you try to sell to your audience who are just there to consume and watch and be interested, you're going to change the whole dynamic. So it's not about selling to your audience either. It's about providing them with enough value that they get interested enough that they make the decision to take action. And then you can serve them, and they made that decision.
The universe shows up for us the way that we show up, right? It's like we don't have to focus on really even selling. It's just about being clear on how we want to show up, and then coming from a place of service, coming from a place of providing value. I don't want to backtrack too much in our conversation, but one other really important piece that I think you brought up when you were answering my initial question is you had explained, right, how you had your own weight loss journey and how other people just naturally started coming to you. That's really important because there are a lot of people out there that think that they have to find this grand purpose or, they're looking for something outside themselves. But it's really our own unique gifts and talents. That's what we're meant to share in service to other people. And so your example was perfect. It's often something that is part of our own journey or something that we consider common sense for ourselves. It's often that thing that is the very thing that we're meant to share with the world, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be, that's why I say being open to the possibilities, to go back to where we started, you have to be completely focused on what it is you want to achieve because you have to take action and you have to take action towards a specific outcome that you desire. But just because you desire that outcome doesn't mean that's the outcome that you're supposed to achieve. I mean, who are we in the grand scheme of things? We're just one little piece of this huge plan. So who are we to dictate what we should or shouldn't be doing, how we best show up? But I also believe the universe leaves clues. So if you're open to the clues and you follow those paths, you'll end up where you're supposed to be. And I believe that every little thing that you do, just like I said, being a chef for 6 years and then going into the weight loss journey, and then they're all along the way, along that journey, it was guided. So even though it doesn't seem like that led to where I am, I learned things in every phase that I now use with what I do today that make me effective.
That is a perfect segue into my next question because every experience in our lives shapes who we become, right? So for you, what experience has been most significant in shaping who you become today?
Really, persistence. Just being completely persistent throughout the whole thing and trusting that the next thing is going to be the best thing. It's so easy to get frustrated, but if you know yourself enough and you really believe there is a grander plan and that you're being guided, then you really don't have to be frustrated because, you may not end up exactly where you envision, but who's to say you won't end up somewhere 10 times better than that? So, I mean, that persistence has been so key, knowing and being able to let go. That's another one. Because again, I was so focused. I wanted to be the chef. I wanted to own these restaurants and do those things. And I could see myself there and I could feel it. And I was working so hard towards it. But there came a point where I knew I just had this intuitive feeling that, it's time to let that go. I didn't have anything to prove to anyone. So I'm very, very good. And along my path, I've started a lot of things that haven't worked. I've done a lot of different things. And so it's I'm not afraid to try something, but the minute I have that intuitive feeling that it's not the thing or it's not going to pan out the way that it's supposed to or whatever, I'm very good at letting it go and not getting hung up on that because I don't regret the fact that it didn't work out, but I know that, okay, I learned something here. Now, what can I apply this to? Where can I go with this? And when the next thing starts, you jump in. And if you do that and you're persistent and you're focused and you're following the clues, it has to feel right. You have to use your intuition. You have to go where you're pulled because a lot of people too, I think they try to push. They try to say, this is what I want, and they try to push to be there. But anything you push pushes back. If you go where you're pulled, then you end up where you're supposed to be. So, I mean, I'm not telling you to go quit your job or doing what you're doing. If something doesn't feel right, maybe it's time to explore something that does. And be okay with that. And, like I said, there was a lot of people that said a lot of things when I left the food world. But I had the feeling, I knew it didn't feel right, and this other path did. And so being able to let that go and move forward and go towards what felt right was a much more natural path for me. Now, it was still the last 10 years of being an entrepreneur, the first 8 of my 10 years were difficult. They were hard. There was a lot of lean times. And there were times when I woke up and kind of felt lost. I mean, I knew I was going the right direction, but I didn't know where I was in the process. You ever see that meme online? You see it a lot of the 2 guys that are digging a tunnel and they're trying to get to the diamonds. And one guy stops and he looks dejected and he's walking backward with his pick on his shoulder and he's like a centimeter from finding them, and the other guy's like 10 feet and he's furiously digging, and it's like you just never know when you're going to hit that, so don't stop. It's kind of like that. I like that meme or that comic or whatever you want to call it, but like you never know if the next thing's going to be the best thing or the next thing's going to be the thing. So you just got to keep going, and you got to know that if this thing doesn't work, be okay with letting it go, cutting your losses, moving on, but realizing that you gained something from being there and from doing it. You're not a failure. That thing just didn't work out, but it really did work out if you look at it that way, because you took something from it that you can apply to the next thing and be further ahead than if you wouldn't have done that first thing.
Absolutely. And we could have an entire podcast episode dedicated just to that topic. I mean, just to summarize that, right? It's like everybody is ultimately a product of their past experiences and what they've been taught, what they've been exposed to in their environment. So the willingness to let go, the willingness to trust your intuition in that path is critical, because each one of us is like this little grain of sand in a sea of potential and possibility. And we don't see the whole big picture. We only see what we know. We only know what we know. So letting go and trusting your gut, it's so important.
I'll add to that real quick.
Okay.
Just to kind of piggyback on that. The greatest power we have as human beings is the power to decide again. So if you make a decision that doesn't work out, it doesn't have to be the last decision. You'll get another opportunity to make another decision. So, a lot of us, we're so afraid of making the wrong decision that we make no decision, and that in and of itself is a decision. So the point is, decide, move forward, commit, and if it doesn't work out, you learn something, but now you can make another decision, instead of having that paralysis by analysis and not doing anything and being stuck where you are.
Absolutely. You've shared, we've already covered so many key points today, but what would be the number one piece of advice you would give somebody right now who's feeling called to do more, and they might be feeling doubt or fear around taking that leap?
I'll tell you what one of my mentors told me. It was just like a thing in passing, but it really made an impact on me, because I was one of those people up until this point, and this was probably 2 or 3 years in my entrepreneurial journey, where I always wanted everything to be perfect before I put it out there, right? You work on your website and your logo and your business cards and your messaging, and you try to get everything just so. But there was a time when I didn't quite know what to do, and I was kind of asking him, and this guy was a super, super successful business person, and very plainly, he gave me one statement. He said, "The work will teach you how to do it." And that was it. And it was like, that turned on a huge light bulb. And it's like, you just got to go do the work. And if you do the work, you'll figure it out. You can't figure it out. It's always important to read and to develop yourself and to listen to podcasts and to consume. But at the end of the day, if there's something you want, you have to go get it. And, you may or may not get it, but the work will teach you how to do it. The work will teach you the process. So the number one thing that I would say to anyone is, if there's something that you feel like you want to do, or something feels like it's pulling at you, just go do it. Just go give it a shot, and allow the process of trying and the process of the actual work to teach you. When I went into cooking, the reason I didn't go to traditional quote unquote school is because I had this apprenticeship where, I was just going to test it out. Before I went to school, I sat down with my parents, and my dad said, "Where do you want to go to school?" And I said, "I want to be a chef, but here's the deal. And I want to go, the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, is like the number one. It's the Harvard of cooking schools." I was like, I want to go there, but I've never worked in a restaurant up to this point. I cooked a lot. I took a lot of cooking classes, but I never worked in a restaurant. I said, I don't know if I'm going to love it. So I'd hate to go there and spend like 40 or 50 grand on a semester and it not work out. And so I said, I'm going to go to community college. It costs a couple $1,000s. I'll see if I like it. If I do, great, I can transfer. If I don't, nothing gained, nothing lost. I can figure it out. So I went to the community college, and because I went there, I ended up landing that 3-year apprenticeship at the number one city club in America, which in and of itself was very unlikely to happen, but it did. And so I got in there, and when I landed that, I said, I don't need to go anywhere else, because I'm doing the work. The work teaches you how to do it. So anytime I would go to school, I went to school 1 day a week, and I worked 6 days a week. And when the day I went to school, it felt like I was like wasting time, because I was learning so much more actually doing the work. And I still went because I still had to go to school. But the point is, just do the work. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to get experience. Put yourself in the game. and then make adjustments as you go. I call it the AMA, action, measure, adjust. Take action, measure your results, use the data. Don't really get emotionally attached to the data, but analyze it and use it to adjust your approach so you can then take better action to get the results you want to get.
That's so true. We never have clarity on the entire path ahead. I mean, we have to take action in order for things to start to fall into place. And that's where I feel like a lot of people get stuck. They think they have to have it all figured out.
That's where the focus comes into play. If you're focused about what it is you want, you'll take action. But then as you're taking action, make sure you're open and you notice what are the little things around you. Notice where you're being guided. Notice what's coming up. Notice the trends. And then when you notice something that keeps coming up over and over again, it's time to explore that. One of those things for me in my life that's a perfect example is LinkedIn. I was been on LinkedIn for 10 years, but I never used it because I thought it was just a job platform. Like people, and like I said, I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years. So I'm like, well, I should be there, but I don't need to ever open it. So I would never open the app. Then one week I was doing a lot of talks with guests on for 10-Minute Mindset because I have a lot of conversations throughout the week. And it was a Tuesday, and it was the fourth person in 2 days that told me how cool LinkedIn is. So at that point, after hearing it for the fourth time in 2 days, I said, you know what, I better get on there and at least see what's happening. So I got on, started playing with it, started just seeing what's there, seeing what other people are doing, DMing. And that was, about 8 months ago. And, because of that, I met you, Jennifer. Because of that, I've met a lot of other people. We probably wouldn't have met if I never would have played on LinkedIn. And it was because I noticed the trend of people telling me it took 4 times. I had to hear it 4 times. But then I took action, got on there, played with it, realized it's more than just a place to find jobs. And that led to us having this conversation and a bunch of other conversations I've had with people that I've helped facilitate their message and learn from them. And it's been a really good thing. So it's just noticing those trends and then not being blind to them, not noticing them, but noticing them and then acting because you've noticed them.
Absolutely. I feel like I keep going back to the action part, but that's so important. Another thing in regard to action, right, is that sometimes we might think we're taking action towards something, but sometimes we're only willing to take action within our comfort zone. And that's when you go back to what you're talking about in regard to following your intuition. Our intuition is often not logical and not rational, but that's because our intuition, our soul is focused on expansion. And that means doing something we haven't done before. So again, going back to the willingness to follow that and the willingness to trust our path. So very important. So where can everybody find you? If they want to learn more about you, check out your podcast.
Yeah, I'm all over social media, so you'll find me on any social media platform. But you can go to marioporreca.com. That's my personal website. And then my company's site, as Jennifer mentioned at the beginning of this, launchingapodcast.com. You can go there and see what we're doing with, busy professionals, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, helping them really build a platform to build their business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for just all the wisdom that you've shared, truly. I know it's going to inspire a lot of people. Oh,
I'm so glad. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been so much fun, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So anyone listening, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook or, through the websites or whatever, I'm always happy to help anything I can do. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This has been fun.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you for listening to the Awake and On Purpose podcast. Please visit us and subscribe to the podcast at awakeandonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can connect with your higher purpose and take that leap of faith to make your impact in the world, visit us at jenniferspor.com. And while you're there, be sure to join our email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.